What do you see in your mind's eye when I say a wardrobe or a lamppost or maybe a fawn and Lucy under an umbrella? How about tea with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver or a white witch in a sleigh? I would bet that a lot of us are seeing very similar images. We're actually seeing the images of the Chronicles of Narnia, illustrations that formed part of who we are because they carry us into the world of Narnia that we loved so much. Those illustrations were created by a woman named Pauline Baynes. And today, I've got a treat for you. Welcome to the Read-Aloud Revival. I'm Sarah Mackenzie. This is the show that helps you make meaningful and lasting connections with your kids through books. And today I have a treat for you. I have the author and illustrator of the next book that you've got to have in your own home library and gracing your bookshelves. It is called Painting Wonder: How Pauline Baynes Illustrated the Worlds of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Yes, those images that all of us think of in our heads, the White Witch on the sleigh, Mr. Tumnus and Lucy under the umbrella, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver having tea with 4 children in Narnia. Those were all illustrated by a woman that most of us don't know much about. But Katie Wray Schon is here to fix that. She has created a beautiful, truly stunning picture book biography about the woman behind the illustrations of Narnia. She's a mother of 3, a Texan, and I think you're going to love her. Here's my conversation with Katie Wray Schon. Okay, well, Katie, pretty much everyone who's either watching this or listening to this has seen the illustrations of Pauline Baynes because she did all of the original illustrations for the Chronicles of Narnia. We've got I think for so many of us, those images of Lucy and Mr. Tumnus under the umbrella or the lamppost or the White Witch on her sleigh. They're formative. They're images we can all call to mind right away. But I never called to mind even once who illustrated that? And I think about illustrators kind of a lot. So then when your project came across my desk and I was like, oh yeah, wait, who did make these illustrations? It was so fun for me to be invited into the mystery of this woman. So what was it that caused you to get interested about Pauline Baynes?
Yeah. And I love talking about this because really it was failure. In a couple ways. Okay. One was that I was trying to build up my portfolio, my illustration portfolio, because same here, I grew up with those images. I could close my eyes and picture them and I loved them, but I had just somehow never looked into it. Anyway, so I decided, okay, I'm going to build up my portfolio and I'll add some chapter book illustrations as part of it. The Narnia books are my favorite books, so I'll use them. I'll draw some pictures of Narnia. And I sat there trying to draw and I couldn't do it because I couldn't get the original images out of my head. It was I had this mental reference and I kept trying to sort of break away from it, and they're there and they're so simple. And so I look at them and be like, what? Who is this? Who did this? And so I started just digging into her story a little bit, and it's such a beautiful story, and she just seemed like such a wonderful person. And I had actually always said, I will never do a picture book biography of another artist because it's just too hard.
It's the hardest thing possible.
It's the hardest thing possible.
Yeah.
But
let's start there. Then you ended up starting there.
Yeah. Exactly. I just loved her story so much. And I was so struck by the fact that I had never known her name, that nobody really knows her name. She's kind of this unknown, and yet her work is everywhere. It's in so many people's heads.
It was so fun because when I sent an early digital copy of Painting Wonder to John Hendricks, who of course is the author and illustrator behind the Myth Makers, his reaction was, let me see if I can remember exactly what he wrote. Pauline Baynes is way overdue for more people to know about her. I'm so excited about this book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And that's exactly true. And I think I think the people who do know of her all have that feeling. And so I'm excited too. I hope this puts her name in a few more people's heads.
Yeah. Helps us, I think, for me at least, as soon as I get to know an illustrator through a picture book biography or some, like even right now, getting to know you as an illustrator, seeing then illustrations elsewhere will make me feel kind of like I do if I see almost the same, it brings up the same feelings in me as if I see like a vase that belonged to my grandmother or something. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, that's by my friend. That's by somebody I love. That's by somebody I know. And it just adds a different level of connection to the story for me as a reader.
Yeah. And Pauline did a lot of illustrating, and not all of it is common anymore or still in print, but there's a couple of places like in the Borrower series, not the first book, but some of the later books, she did those illustrations. She did probably the most iconic cover of Watership Down. And so she's kind of sprinkled around, and it's been really fun. The more I got to know her and her work, the more I now see it, randomly at the bookstore, like, I know that one.
Yeah. I know who did that. Yeah. That's so great. What were your own favorite books growing up, or your own favorite illustrators? Did you have favorite illustrators growing up?
We had a lot of the classics around. And so I think I grew up sort of with, Robert McCloskey, and Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are, like so many other people. There's just something about those illustrations that sticks in your head and grabs you, and P.D. Eastman. And so we had all the, Dr. Seuss, all that kind of classic stuff. And then there were a couple of random, here and there. I don't even know who the illustrator was. Here's another one to look into. But I had this fairy tale book that had these very sort of 60s or 70s style illustrations, but gorgeous. And it was very decorative, and they were just so distinctive. And so you kind of have these images in your head. But I never thought that hard about the illustrations. They just, they absorb.
Who made them. Yeah.
They come in, who made them. Yep. And then, and then moving up to chapter books, and definitely the Narnia books. I read a lot of Nancy Drew and things like that.
I mean, I think over half of our listeners or viewers probably just went like, oh, yes, Nancy Drew. Oh, yeah. We all did too. We all did too.
Just devoured all of those.
So this was your first book. This is your first book, I should say. What surprised you about making it?
So this, in particular, picture book biographies have this, have some special challenges to them. And I think, finding my way around, because other drafts that I had worked on, other stories were not biographies. And so it was kind of it was interesting to feel my way through that process, and kind of get to the writing in a way that felt right for me, because you get the information, but then you have to find your voice and put your voice in it. And then I think honestly the biggest surprise for me, because I've worked on other stories, and I've had drafts, and I've had things that I've tried out that haven't panned out, and so the process of writing and creating the book and doing the drawings, in some ways, I'd done my time sort of doing that homework. But what was really amazing, actually, about this project was getting to work with you and with the rest of the team at Waxwing, because you spend so much time working on your own, doing this stuff, with your head down writing or your head down illustrating. And then to be able to work with a team who really cares about books in general and really cared about this book. And it's just the most rewarding, wonderful thing. And I guess I didn't know what to expect. It's a little intimidating when you first get into it and it's your first book. Like, oh, am I going to be good enough? Is this going to be okay? And it was just this beautiful team process. So that was a very, very pleasant surprise.
I love that so much. I mean, it is true. It's like, I remember the first couple of books that we made at Waxwing. I knew the writing process. I'd worked with editors before, but I also didn't know, so how do we do this with an illustrator to get to a final book? And so the whole process is something of a mystery until you start walking it. I mean, you're right. We do have the best team at Waxwing. They're the most creative, wonderful, collaborative people. I love that about making picture books, actually, is that it's like we're making this soup, but without everybody's different ingredients, it all comes together in this very complex, unique flavor that we just couldn't have done without
Yeah.
Oh, I just love it so much. It's like
I
the
know,
ultimate teamwork.
Me too. It
Yeah.
really is. It really
Yeah.
is. And I love that. I really, really love that. So makes
It's
me
like a group project where everybody pulls their weight and brings their unique genius into play.
Right. And
Which,
and everybody's so excited about books and picture books. Is, it's just they're just these beautiful, wonderful things. And so to be able to work with a bunch of other people who feel that way,
yes.
it's really, really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Was any part of the process more challenging than you expected it to be?
I would say once I had the writing where I wanted it to be, which took a lot of revisions, and it took a lot of reframing. There's so many different ways to approach somebody's life if you're trying to boil it down to 600 words. So that took a lot of over and over and over again until I kind of landed in the right spot. And then from there, I think probably the thing that surprised me most from a challenge perspective was how much I felt like I had to research before I drew anything. And some of it was very quick and some of it was a little more in depth. But when you're creating something that's historic, and any object you put in there, any flower, any boat, any of these things, you can't just make it up anymore. You have to know that it's appropriate for the time period, and hopefully I got it all right. But it just took a little more preparation, in a different way than other image making that I'd done. And there is not a lot of documentation of Pauline's life. As, famous people go, it's relatively unknown. There were not a lot of pictures of her, especially as a young person. And so it was this mix of really trying to reach out and find as much as I could, and also just knowing that I had to look at, okay, what was the fashion in the time, in the place where she was, to try to come up with the outfits, as opposed to having an actual photo of her that I could just draw from.
There's so many different elements here because we're working on another historical fiction picture book right now at Waxwing, where just this last week I was reviewing illustrations, and our art director had noticed that, wait a second, I think that glue pot, or maybe it was the author that noticed it. Someone on the team was like, wait a second, I think that glue pot, she wouldn't have a glue bottle that looked like that at that time. She would have had a pot of glue instead of a bottle of glue. That kind of thing that is why you need so many different eyes on it. But actually, I think you had 2 more levels of complexity that I just want to make sure you give yourself full credit for. One you already mentioned, which is that doing a picture book biography about an illustrator actually feels to me like one of the hardest picture books you can do, because as the illustrator, I as a writer feel like there's already the difficulty in, like you said, paring down someone's life into 600 words, and you can only tell one story. So everybody has like all these threads. You can only pull one thread in a picture book.
Exactly.
So it's like figuring out which thread that's going to be, and then where you're going to pull it is a complicated thing. But then from the illustration perspective, you want to give the sense of Pauline's illustrations without duplicating her style or illustrations. And I cannot. I keep watching it being done. You're all amazing, but that's got to be so complicated. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, process. It's one of those things that you end up part sort of coming up with a plan, and then part just kind of letting things move as they move. And I feel like, I developed a certain voice in the book, and some of these swirls and things like that to sort of show the fantastical elements coming into the real life, and that ended up really helping me find a way to show what was in her work, or to try to bring to life some of the excitement of her work without it being a copy of what she made. But it took it took some revisions, particularly in some spots where we're really trying to be like, this is the moment where she drew the Narnia pictures, and let's try to capture the excitement and the flavor of it. But really, we want people to go get the book and look at her illustrations, not have them here. And you guys were very helpful too. There were times when it was all right, let's try to sort this out together. Like, here's the challenge, this work or this work, and how far can we go, and what's sort of the right flavor for it. So like I said, I did not intend to do a picture book biography of an illustrator, but nobody else was doing it, and so you just have to grab the challenge that's handed to you. So
yeah. Well, one of the things that I think you did so beautifully, and I know we were really committed to as a team, was making the book Painting Wonder an invitation to go look at Pauline's illustrations, to go read the Narnia books, to go like an invitation, not a substitution for. And I think that is something that you did so beautifully, so that kids who see Painting Wonder will go like, wait, show me Narnia if they haven't already experienced Narnia, or take me back to Narnia for those of us who've already visited many times but can't get enough.
I have some wonderful critique partners that I write with, and one of them saw an early draft, and after reading it, she said, well, I've never read the Narnia books, but now I kind of want to. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
You're like, my work here
where we're
is
going. Exactly.
Do you have a favorite spread in the book?
It's like choosing a favorite child.
Which we might be able to do depending on the day.
right? Not on camera though. Yeah, I think the one that there's a lot of different things that I love. I love the ones that are bringing books to life, because I love books, and that's another thing that I was so happy to be able to have in this book, because it was a part of her life, was that she loved books and how much they meant to her. And so some of the explosions of storybooks I really love, but I think one of my favorite stories with this, and I feel like I'm already, beating this horse dead, but there was one spread in there, the bombs dropping on England and everybody dropping what they were doing to help spread. I had that idea. I drew it. I loved it. And I had at least probably a couple people who saw early versions of the book who said, no, I think that's too kind of complex for kids, or too, I don't think they'll understand what's happening. I think you should take that one out. And I didn't, and I'm glad. And I had people who are very positive about it too, but that one always stands out to me as like you do need to get feedback, and it's important to listen to your feedback, but it's also important to stick to your guns. And to kind of go with your gut and your experience and things like that. But and so I always think about that one. That one's a great reference for me. And even when I'm giving people feedback, I'll say, this is coming from me. This is my opinion, but it may not be right. And if this spread means a lot to you, then keep it in there. So.
Well, that's one of the spreads I would mention as one of my favorites. And I think there's so many other books too, where we read about, knit your bit, or making your victory garden, or like all of these different ways that I think kids do know that that's what happened during World War II, is people dropped everything they were doing to help.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful, like the way you have it laid out and the way the typography is laid out is just beautiful. The other spread that is my favorite is the one where Pauline is making maps for, I was going to say the Army. Was it the Army, or
it was the Navy? No, it was
the Navy. Okay.
Technically the Admiralty, right?
Yes, right. That makes more sense. Yeah. Yes, I love that. I love that image. And actually, maybe we can put on screen here you can see that particular image move here across the screen, because when you purchase Painting Wonder, you also get access to this beautiful video book where we read aloud this story to your kids, and Katie's beautiful illustrations are animated slightly, just like this beautiful spread. So I love that one in particular. I just think you did such an amazing job of every time you turn the page, it's like we're looking from a different viewpoint. There's so many different, there's so many times in picture books where we flip through the pages and we're seeing everything from the same distance, like kind of like we're sitting at a window, looking in the window of a house or something, and everything's happening at the same depth. But what you do is you give us pictures from over and close up, and like really close up, and then further back, and then way far back. It feels very immersive because of that, because of like you invite us into the scene by like getting us into all these different places coming into each illustration.
Well, thank you. Thank you for appreciating all of that. It's one of those things that when I'm creating a new story, start with these little tiny thumbnail drawings, and that's really even then you have to start thinking about where are we looking from, and how do we sort of pass time and move through different stages of this book. And this book covers a lot of time in terms of we're going from when she's a little girl to 15, 20, 30 years later. And so Yeah, thank you. I hope that the sense of immersion comes from those moments. So it's always good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about how the writing process and the illustrating process were so different.
Mm-hmm.
What did one of those come easier to you than the other, do you think?
I think they came so differently. The writing process again was this. I had early drafts after I had read the story, and then you try to sort of write down almost like a bulleted list, what happened and what you want to talk about, and then there were probably 25 different ways that I tried to bring it to life. And so it's first this editing process, right, of all of the information that you have and paring it down to what you think is the right through line. And then once you have the information, you still need to carry it somehow. And that's voice and style and the words that you use. And it actually, with this book, and I now use this as a revision technique, I had written it over and over again, and I was kind of stuck on this one draft that just felt a little too much like I was telling, everything that happened point by point. And I finally sat down and I thought, my favorite writing is very lyrical, and not quite poetry, but these evocative words and phrasing, and it moves almost like a poem. And I realized, wait a second, that's how I like to write, and I have not written it this way. Okay. And so I turned that draft over on the table, and I had all of the information in my head because I'd written it over so many times. And then I just wrote it fresh,
Wow.
without even looking at the old draft. And then I went back, and there were a couple of things that I pulled from there, and, some structural things that needed to change. And so that was a major breakthrough for this one. And it was just one of these, duh moments where here I am, and this is the kind of writer I say I am, and yet I've written this in a completely different way.
Yeah. And I also wonder if you would have been able to get to that more lyrical, poetic draft if you had just started there. Probably not, because you needed like all of the thinking and collecting of data and research and everything that you did for the original drafts. So it just reminds me that like nothing that we do when we're writing is a waste, even if we don't use any of it. Like you said, you turned the draft over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that crushing the fear of starting over is really important in this world and in this process, both with the art and with writing. We really do feel, once we have spent a certain amount of time on a piece of artwork or a written manuscript, you have this tension of like, oh, no, I can't start over. It was hard to do. And there it is. Yes. And it feels very scary to revise. And so over the years, I think of making more stories, that is one thing that I can say I've gotten much better at, is just not being afraid to toss it out and start fresh, because I still have all of the skill that I put into the first one isn't gone. It didn't leave me.
That's right.
But that's how we feel. It's a very funny thing.
It's a good thing that we are able to save drafts in so many forms nowadays. Exactly. So like I never delete anything. It's all there in some form. So I can kind of trick my brain into being like, I know that we will come back to this one, but let's just try something different, even if I'll never go back to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
The research. Talk to me about the research. Where did you go? Like you said, there was very little documented about Pauline.
Yes. So I started with there's a wonderful tribute website that some of her friends made, and actually obituaries. She passed away in 2008, and so all of the obituaries were online, and so I was able to sort of get and read through those. There is mention of her in some of the longer works about C.S. Lewis or Tolkien. She gets kind of a page here or there, and so digging through those. And there's an old magazine. It was a publication put out by Penguin in the, I'm trying to remember the year now. I want to say 60s or 70s. Okay. And they had an interview with her. And so it was really bits and pieces here and there. And then after a while, I got brave enough to send an early draft to some of her friends and acquaintances. And I was put in touch with her son-in-law. And so that was very helpful and very confirming, because I felt like, okay, I'm not, again, there was not a ton to pull from, and you have to bring this story to life and talk about her as a child. And I wasn't there. And,
Yeah.
and so that was really wonderful, because they were very kind and supportive and excited, and, gave me that feedback of like, yes, this feels right. So that was that. And then there were some things like, oh no, it was this and not that, or this and not that. Yeah. And here we are. And honestly, the part of rewriting the book that one time was recognizing, okay, I don't have every detail. I can't write a manuscript that focuses in on very specific tiny details of what was happening at that moment. I have to use that constraint of not having a line by line story of her life to kind of capture the feel of it.
It also, I can imagine it feeling like almost, searching for a needle in a haystack. I was trying to find a better metaphor, because that's so cliche. But actually, you kind of do. Even as you're like gathering, I know this is how I felt when I was writing about Barbara Cooney. I was gathering as much as I could find, and I just had no idea what was going to be useful or not until I was just like, it doesn't matter. Right now, I'm just gathering it no matter what.
Right. You just try to just take it all in, and also, I can't believe I didn't mention this. Trying to see and absorb and hunt down on eBay or wherever I could find it as much of her work as I could. And then one of my favorite moments actually in sort of research and part of this project was I went to at Williams College in Massachusetts at the Chapin Library. They have a special collections library, and they were given all of her work, her sketches and things like that, except the Narnia stuff, I think is with the Narnia estate, but the rest of it, everything else she gifted to them, because there was a librarian there who was a big collector of hers and very, very, very knowledgeable about her work. And so going there and sitting down with the actual pieces of paper that she drew on was incredible. Wow. And it was such a reminder of just how talented she was. And you see it, of course, in her books and in her drawings, but reproduction, especially in chapter books, it especially was not as wonderful as we would want it to be sometimes. And so looking at her, she just had so much detail, these beautiful little drawings. So that was really wonderful. That really kind of gave me this boost to keep going with this, because it's a long process, and you question sometimes, is this the right thing? Is this even valuable? Does the world need this? And then sitting down with that work and saying, yes, the world needs this.
Yes. Yeah. Was there anything about her life in particular that you found really inspiring?
The love of books, and how that when she was a child and she had this very difficult moment where everything was kind of taken away and she was on her own. And she said, and her friends have said, what really got her through that time was reading. And she found stories, and she loved them, and she could relate to them and enter this other world. And I love that. And I find that so relatable. That's what reading means to me. I love reading. I love books, and I've always loved books and storybooks. And so I think that was probably the first thing that gave me this feeling of connection with her. Okay, this is, I get that. And to want to talk about that. And then she also, I think, was just a very humble person. She was never out there going after accolades. It sounds like she always sort of thought of herself as, not that important in the grand scheme, not in a bad way. Just, I think she just loved doing the work and just worked until the day she died. She had so many projects that she was in the midst of, and it was just the joy of making art. So I also, that felt very relatable to me too. And
kindred, like she's a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
What would you ask her if you could sit down to dinner with her?
Yeah. Oh, I would love to hear about what she was working on towards the end. She had a lot of projects. She actually illustrated some Bible verses as picture books, and illustrated the creed, and had this kind of, she had this deep sense of mythology and this love for the stories, even in religion. And in her work when I was there at Williams College, it looked like she was starting to sort of map out the book of Tobias, or the book of Tobit. It's the book of Tobit.
Okay.
Old Testament story. And I'd just be so interested to know, like, what were you still thinking about doing? I mean, she worked and worked and worked. I know she had things in her mind, and I would love to hear what things were going through her head and what she's still working on. If she's, who knows, maybe she's up there working on things right now. So.
Yeah, that's right. I love it. Well, I'd love to point out that you're a busy mother of 3. And because so many of our viewers and listeners are moms who are, all in on their kids and want to be all in on their kids, and also feel this tug toward telling stories and making art and either drawing or writing. And I'm wondering if you could talk to those mamas for a minute about anything that sticks out to you as like that's been helpful to you as you navigated that same tension. Yeah. I guess it's fair to call it a tension.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think that we are all creative. And I think that it's a gift, and God made us in his image, and he is creative. And so we all are creative in some way, and it comes out in a lot of different ways. And I think sometimes when we have so many other things going on and so much pulling at us, it's hard to give that validation, in ourselves or with other people. But it is valid. That's what I want to tell them. You are a creative person, and these things that you are thinking about or feel drawn to do are valuable first. And second, I think, just do them when you can, and know that it will enrich your family, and even it's so hard to take the time when there's so much that you should or could be doing, but it's so valuable, and it really gives to everybody, not only to have you in a place where you feel maybe more fulfilled or like you're accomplishing something that you feel passionate about, but also kids are extremely creative and they understand that, and I have just loved being able to share with my kids this process, and they're so excited and they saw me struggle. They saw me get rejected, they saw me try and fail, and they saw me keep going, and now be in this wonderful place where this book is going to come out into the world, and they're just thrilled. So it's a gift to them too, and it's one that I'm very happy to give.
Speaking of it being a gift to them, something I think we sometimes forget happens when we are making art, whether that's writing or drawing or some other form of creativity. There's so many different forms. Is that what our kids see in adulthood so often when they're watching adults is like all the adulting that we have to do, all the like, I want to say drudgery, or like just the tasks that have to be done to make things work. And that doesn't give them a ton to look forward to, but if they can see their mom lighting up as she's drawing pictures or writing stories, it gives them this whole idea that like this part of you get to hold on to this and carry it with you into adulthood. You get to have this forever. And that feels to me like a really beautiful vision to give to our kids of something to look forward to.
Yeah, I love that. That was very well put. And yes, and they really do embrace it. They really do absorb it. And at the same time, I think it's important to remember that, yes, do the creative thing that you feel drawn to do, but do it with a sense of exploration, and not with a sense of, if I don't accomplish this thing, I'm not valuable, because that's not true. As we were talking about before, all of the steps along the way, all of these little baby steps that maybe you can fit in, when your kids are very young, they are meaningful and they are taking you somewhere. And it does take time. Yeah. It takes time no matter who you are, but I think especially when you're sort of balancing, your own creative impulses with all the things you want to give your children. The process can stretch out, but there's a lot of value in that. And there's so much value in the inspiration that we get from our kids too. And so it's to all those moms out there, you're in a valuable place, and you take your creativity seriously, and also take your time.
Yes, I love it. Oh, I love it. It's like we get meaning from it, and it's a beautiful way to enrich our lives, but we don't get our worth from it. So that's an important distinction that I hear you saying.
Yeah. Because we can put pressure on ourselves too. We like to.
We're really good at it.
Good at that.
Some of us are extra good at it.
Succeed. And that's important. And again, like I said, being able to get this to the point where I get to work with an amazing team of people on it is incredible. But there are a lot of years where it was just me. Yeah. Working on things, and those were valuable and necessary too.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you the most cruel question of the day as we wrap things up.
No.
If you had to just pick Chronicles of Narnia or Lord of the Rings, what would it be? Because, of course, Pauline did illustrations for both C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. I have to know.
Oh, gosh. I love them. I love them both. I think at least at this point in my life, I feel like I have a closer relationship to the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
I read those books probably every year. My family likes to tease me about and I love
ultimate comfort reading, truly.
Ultimate comfort reading, but also this beautiful moral compass that they have that is just so refreshing for me. And then Tolkien offers so much of that too, and so much about beauty and life and bravery and all these things. But right now we're at the point where I am reading out loud, especially with my youngest, the Chronicles of Narnia. It's the first time she's reading them, and it is so much joy.
Yeah. Oh, that's just treasure it. Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
I'm saying I love The Hobbit, but I am a Narnia girl through and through. Those are going to be the ones that I reach for first.
I know.
Sorry, Tolkien, but we do love The Hobbit too. Don't worry.
Oh, we do. Oh, we do.
I can hear some people guffawing right now.
I know.
Well, thank you so much for coming. We are absolutely thrilled to getting this book in as many hands as possible. And we just think the readers, young and old alike, are going to be just delighted and enriched by getting to meet Pauline Baynes. So thank you so much for taking the time to tell us her story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where can our viewers and listeners keep up with you and what you're working on?
Oh, good question. So I am somewhat active on Instagram. I'm not all on top of the social media, but I am on Instagram and on Blue Sky, and both of them are Katie Wray Schon. And my website usually has some tidbits and portfolio pieces and things like that. So I would love to connect with people. I love talking about children's books. I love talking about Narnia. I love talking about Pauline Baynes. So I hope I get to talk with some of you out there about it sometime soon.
Wonderful. We'll put links to all of those places in our show notes, which are at readaloudrevival.com/260. Thanks so much, Katie. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Show notes for this show are at readaloudrevival.com/260, because this is episode 260. You can also get Painting Wonder now anywhere books are sold, or by going to waxwingbooks.com. I just absolutely know this is going to be a favorite you want to pass down for generations in your home. It's big, it's beautiful, it's truly a work of art, and it's an invitation into the world of Narnia that will capture the hearts of your family. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, but in the meantime, you know what to do. Go make meaningful and lasting connections with your kids through books.